You ever watch a room full of people laugh at you and realize your own child is laughing too? That was the day I learned silence burns deeper than fire. My name is Clarissa Holt, and before I tell you what happened at that wedding, let me ask you something. Have you ever been insulted so smoothly that the whole room applauded? If you have, then you'll understand every word I'm about to say. It was a Saturday in May, sun spilling through the glass of the Ridgeview Banquet Hall. The smell of jasmine and champagne filled the air, the kind of air that hums with pride and pretense. My son, Ethan, looked so handsome in his black suit, his smile wide but nervous. He just said I do to Brianna, and I swear the girl had grace. She was beautiful, confident, and dripping in the kind of self-assurance that made everyone in that room look twice. I thought to myself, maybe this is the kind of woman he needs, strong, driven. Then came the toast. I remember the clinking of glasses, the shimmer of lights reflecting off the chandeliers, and Brianna, still in her bridal glow, standing tall, her arm around Ethan's shoulder. "To my husband," she said, voice sugar sweet. "To the man who's always taking care of everyone around him, including me and now his mom." The laughter came fast, loud, and sharp, like a match flicked against dry paper. Someone shouted, "She said that!" And I watched Ethan's face freeze in that polite half-smile people wear when they're embarrassed but can't show it. My hand tightened around my glass. I smiled too, because what else does a mother do when she's just been turned into a punchline? I laughed with them, quietly, but inside I felt a wall start to rise. Not anger yet, just awareness. While they went on dancing, I sat at the edge of the reception hall, pretending to fix my corsage. Ethan didn't come over, neither did Brianna. Maybe they thought I'd gone to rest. Maybe they thought I didn't notice the way people kept looking in my direction afterward, half pity, half amusement. But I noticed everything. And that's when the memory hit me, his father's voice. I could still hear Harold Holt that night before his surgery, sitting in his study, the lamplight making his wedding ring glint. "Clarissa," he said, "if I'm not here, that house and that trust are your shield. No one will ever take that from you." I hadn't vowed about that conversation in years. It used to feel too far away, too heavy. But that night, as the band played At Last and the newlyweds twirled in the spotlight, I heard his voice again, calm and certain. "Your shield." So I stayed seated, composed, smiling as they spun around the dance floor. Brianna's veil brushed past me once, and for the briefest second she leaned down and said, "I hope you'll be comfortable once Ethan and I start managing things around the house." Managing things. I nodded slowly and said, "I'm sure you will, dear." The photographer snapped a picture right then, me smiling up at her while she leaned down like a queen greeting her subject. And if you look close enough in that photo, you can see the whole truth. Me smiling because I'd already decided. I might be quiet, but I wasn't powerless. The music swelled. People laughed. And as the night stretched on, something shifted inside me. I didn't know what I would do yet, but I knew that toast wasn't just a joke. It was a warning, and I never ignore warnings. It all started like this. Ethan called one Sunday afternoon, his voice bright and casual. "Mom," he said, "we sold the condo faster than expected. Brianna thought maybe we could stay with you for a few weeks while the new house closes." A few weeks. That's what he said. By Thursday, a moving truck blocked my driveway, and by evening, Brianna was directing the movers like she owned the place. I stood by the front porch, coffee in hand, watching as my living room disappeared under white boxes labeled in gold marker: master bedroom, his and hers closet, office, Ethan and Brianna. She'd even written ours on the side of the box carrying the glass vases I'd had since my wedding. When the movers left, Brianna clapped her hands, spun around the living room, and said, "This house has good bones. We can really make it our house in the hills." She said it so casually, our house, like the deed had shifted itself out of my name while I blinked. Ethan just laughed, setting down his keys on the table. I caught the flash of my late husband's old keychain in his hand and felt something twist inside me. That night, the house felt smaller. I heard them laughing upstairs, their footsteps pacing my old hallway. I kept reminding myself, it's fine, it's temporary. But even then a small voice whispered, temporary for who? The next morning, Brianna was already up. She had brewed some fancy imported coffee, filled the kitchen with her perfume, and opened the windows wide. Fresh air brings fresh energy, she said. Then she pulled out a notepad covered in color-coded lines. I made a few lists, she added. Ethan and I talked last night. We think it helped to organize bills and expenses while we're here. Just to keep track. I stared at the list. Groceries, utilities, cleaning supplies, property maintenance, every line neatly priced. Beside each total, she'd written Ethan's portion and shared. There was no mom section. Ethan smiled. Bree's good with finances. You'll love how efficient she is. Of course, I said, and reached for the sugar bowl she'd already moved to a different shelf. It was subtle, but over the next few days, I saw how quickly Ethan let her steer everything. When the landscaper came, she spoke to him. When mail arrived, she sorted it. Even my neighbor Gloria, dropping by with pound cake, whispered, "That girl runs this place like she's been here forever." The breaking point came 2 weeks in. I was upstairs folding laundry when I heard Brianna's voice float through the open window. She was sitting outside on the patio, her phone on speaker. "Yes, girl, we're at our house in the hills." She laughed softly. "It's stunning, but honestly, Ethan and I just have to help Mom transition out. She's sweet, but this big place? Too much for her. Once we buy the deed, we'll remodel everything." Buy the deed.
I stood frozen, the clean sheets still in my hands. The words stung more than the wedding toast ever had. Transition out, like I was a tenant whose lease had expired. I didn't move for a full minute, just listened as she giggled and changed the subject. Then I folded the last towel, placed it neatly in the drawer, and shut it slowly. Downstairs, the air smelled like new candles, hers, not mine. I walked through my own house, touching the walls Harold had built, the banister he'd polished himself, the floorboards he'd sealed when we first moved in. Then I whispered, "Temporary, huh?" Because deep down I knew when someone starts planning your exit, you better start planning your strategy. And I did. There's a certain sound a home makes when it's no longer yours. It's not a crash or a bang. It's quieter, smaller, like drawers closing in the wrong rhythm or chairs being dragged across the floor in a new direction. That's what my mornings started sounding like. By the third week, Brianna had turned my quiet, orderly house into a showroom for a life that wasn't mine. She called it refreshing the space. I called it erasing history. One afternoon, I came downstairs to find my antique china, porcelain dishes I had owned since my wedding, wrapped in bubble plastic and labeled storage. She was humming along to some pop song, lipstick fresh, hair tied back in that perfect bun of hers. "Oh, Mom," she said lightly, "these dishes are lovely, but they're so old. I ordered new stoneware. It's minimal and modern. You'll love it. It's time for a little update." Her voice was sugar, but her hands never stopped moving. She stacked the dishes in boxes like she was burying something. Ethan walked in from the garage, spotted the boxes, and said, "Bree, maybe Mom likes her old stuff." Brianna turned to him, smiled that sweet smile, and replied, "Honey, I'm just helping her modernize. She deserves better." He nodded, slowly, and that was that. By the evening, my dining room looked like a magazine spread, bare, white, soulless. My dishes, my curtains, my life, all edited out. That night, my friend Gloria stopped by with her usual sense of humor and a bag of peach cobbler. The moment she walked in, she froze. "Lord have mercy," she said. "This place looks like a furniture store." I laughed, but there wasn't any joy in it. Apparently, that's the goal. Gloria leaned close. "Clarissa, listen to me. You need to make sure everything's still under your name. These young ones, Lord, they're fast with paper. Don't wait until it's too late. I brushed it off with a smile, but her words stayed. Make sure everything's still under your name. 2 mornings later, I noticed the mail was late. The next day, it didn't come at all. On the 3rd day, I stepped outside early and caught the mail carrier walking past my box. "Morning," I said. "No mail again?" He looked puzzled. "Oh, Mrs. Holt, I've been leaving it in the slot by the door. Your daughter-in-law says she's handling deliveries now." My stomach tightened. When I went back inside, the mail slot was empty. Brianna was in the kitchen typing on her laptop, a stack of envelopes beside her. I caught the familiar cream-colored seal of my insurance company on one of them. "Is that today's mail?" I asked, trying to sound casual. "Oh, yes, I was just sorting it. You get so many boring letters," she said with a laugh, sliding the stack aside. "I'll leave the important ones for you." She didn't notice how long I stared at that envelope before walking away. That night, when she and Ethan went out for dinner, I checked the small trash bin under the kitchen desk. My fingers brushed paper edges, torn corners, fragments of envelopes. I pulled one out. It was from my insurance provider. Half the page was shredded, but I could still read the line. "Address update confirmed. Billing redirected to new contact, B. Holt." I didn't feel rage. I felt clarity, like a fog lifting. I replaced the paper exactly as I'd found it, wiped my hands, and sat down in the quiet. The clock ticked softly in the background, steady as a heartbeat. Gloria's words replayed in my mind. "Don't wait until it's too late." And I promised myself I wouldn't. You can tell who respects you by the way they use your name in public. That night, I became Mom only when it made a joke sound better. Brianna had decided to host a dinner party, not at her place, mine of course, but with her guest list, her playlist, her decor. The long mahogany cable Harold once sanded by hand was now covered with glittery napkin rings and gold-trimmed plates from her favorite home store. I watched strangers fill my dining room, laughing under my chandelier, sipping wine I didn't recognize. Ethan moved through the crowd with his usual ease, refilling glasses, smiling just enough to pass for happy. I stayed mostly quiet, listening, studying. When a woman in red asked how she liked living with the newlyweds, I smiled and said, "It's been an adjustment, but every day has its blessing." Before I could finish, Brianna swooped in with a laugh. "Oh, Mom's fine," she said, touching my shoulder like she was announcing something kind. "She pays rent and stories and sweet tea." The table erupted. Even the woman in red leaned back, laughing, and clinked her glass against Brianna's. My heart didn't break. It clenched. I looked at Ethan. His head dropped, his smile faltered, but he didn't say a word. When the noise finally died, I said softly, "Well, stories and sweet tea have kept this house warm for 40 years. I guess I'll keep paying my share." A few people chuckled awkwardly. Someone said, "You're a good sport, Mrs. Holt." I smiled. I always do. Later, while they were dancing in the living room, I stepped out to the porch. The air was cool, clean, free of her perfume. I stood there a long time, watching the porch light flicker against the glass of the door, listening to Harold's voice in my head, steady, low, certain. "Never let pride answer what wisdom can handle quietly, Clarissa. Pride makes noise, wisdom leaves a record." The next morning, I made coffee and checked the mail she hadn't collected yet. That's when I saw it. A white envelope from my insurance company again, marked Account Manager Update Confirmation. The sender's address was familiar, but the salutation made my skin tighten. "Dear Ethan Holt, your recent request to become the primary account manager for property policy number 1947 has been received." I blinked twice, read it again. "Your recent request." I set the letter down, my pulse thudding in my ears. Ethan would never file that. He doesn't even handle his own car insurance.
which meant only one person could have done it. I folded the letter carefully and tucked it inside a book on the kitchen counter, The Collected Poems of Maya Angelou. Fitting, I thought. There's a poem in there about rising quietly when people expect you to crumble. When Ethan came downstairs later, I asked, "Did you change anything with my home insurance?" He looked up from his phone. "What? No, why?" "Just curious," I said. "Mail's been odd lately." "Oh, Bree probably handled something. She's been helping with all the house stuff, remember?" I nodded, pretending to agree, but inside I felt something shift again, the kind of shift that comes before an earthquake. That evening, Brianna cooked dinner and turned on soft jazz like nothing had happened. I complimented the food, told her the seasoning was perfect, and she smiled like she'd won a trophy. While we ate, I studied her hands, the same hands that boxed my dishes, moved my mail, changed my bills, and rewrote my place in my own home. When dessert was served, she raised her glass again, eyes bright, and said, "To new rules, fresh starts, and family working together." Ethan lifted his glass. I lifted mine too, but only halfway. New rules, I thought? Yes, but this time, they'll be mine. Birthdays tell you who still celebrates you and who only shows up for the pictures. My 63rd was both celebration and stage play. Brianna planned the entire thing. She said she wanted to honor me properly. She reserved a new French restaurant downtown, the kind with crystal chandeliers and a menu printed in gold script. Ethan nodded along as she announced it, beaming like a proud husband. I smiled and thanked them both, though something in me whispered that this wasn't about me at all. The night came dressed in laughter and camera flashes. The table sparkled, roses, champagne, expensive perfume hanging thick in the air. Brianna wore a fitted ivory dress and a confidence that made heads turn. "Tonight," she declared to the waiter, "is about my mother-in-law. Bring your best wine. We're celebrating a queen." For a brief second, I believed her. Then, when the bill arrived, she snatched it before Ethan could reach it. "Absolutely not," she said. "This is my treat." The waiter nodded politely as she pulled out her platinum card with a flourish, pressing it between manicured fingers like she was about to make magic. Swipe. Pause. "Decline, ma'am." The silence was thicker than the air conditioning. Someone coughed. Ethan cleared his throat. "Here, No," she interrupted too quickly, forcing a laugh. "Banks get nervous when you spend too much on one night. Happens all the time." She waved her hand like she was too rich for embarrassment. Ethan handed over his card instead. Conversation resumed, but it never recovered. Everyone avoided eye contact with her and with me. On the ride home, Brianna kept her smile fixed, eyes ahead on the road. "You know," she said lightly, "I've been thinking we really need to tighten our budget. With the way things are, supporting 3 adults under one roof can get expensive. Mom's habits aren't cheap." I turned my face toward the window. The lights outside blurred like wet paint. "My habits?" I asked quietly. "Utilities, maintenance, those little extras," she said. "I just think if we all contribute smarter, Ethan won't feel so pressured." Ethan said nothing, just gripped the steering wheel tighter. When we got home, I thanked them for dinner and went straight to my room. My hands shook a little as I unpinned my brooch and placed it on the dresser. Harold had given it to me on my 40th birthday, so you'll always have something that shines even when people don't, he'd said. I opened my laptop, logged into the bank portal for the trust accounts, and scrolled through the statements. Every account sat untouched, balances steady, dates unchanged. Whatever pressure Brianna was feeling, it wasn't from my side of the fence. Then I noticed something new under linked accounts. A request had been made 2 days ago, an attempt to connect a household card ending in 9448 to my utilities subaccount. The name beside it read B. Holt. I leaned back in my chair and exhaled slowly. She hadn't just wanted control. She wanted access. The next morning, I visited the bank in person. The clerk, a young woman with bright pink nails, looked at the file and frowned. It was denied, she said. The system flagged it. She tried to link a personal rewards card to your trust-funded account. Thank you, I said softly. Walking back to my car, I thought about the restaurant, the way Brianna's card had failed in front of everyone. Maybe the universe had a sense of humor after all. That evening, when she passed me in the hallway, her voice carried that same sugary tone. "Did you enjoy your birthday, Mom?" I smiled. Immensely. She smiled back, not realizing she'd just handed me the first real clue. Her card hadn't failed by accident. It had failed because she'd already tried to spend what wasn't hers. Some people go to church to find peace. I went to my lawyer's office. Same kind of sanctuary, quiet, orderly, and full of truth if you're willing to hear it. Mr. Chambers had been Harold's attorney for nearly 40 years. His office still smelled faintly of pipe smoke and oak polish, the same scent that used to follow him into our home when he'd come for coffee and contract signatures. He stood when I entered, gray suit, kind eyes, still as steady as ever. "Clarissa," he said, taking my hand, "you look well. Harold would have been proud to see you holding everything together." I smiled. "I'm holding it together, yes, but the pieces are trying to scatter." He gestured for me to sit. "I read between the lines of your message. Tell me what's been happening." I told him, carefully, fact by fact. The dinner toast, the move-in, the card decline, the mail. I told him about the attempted account link. He didn't interrupt, just leaned back, hands folded, his expression unreadable. When I finished, he nodded once, then reached for a thick brown folder labeled The Holt Family Trust. "Clarissa," he said, his tone calm but firm, "let's start with the simplest truth. You are the sole trustee. This trust, the house, the accounts, they're yours until the day you sign otherwise. No one, not even your son, has legal access or authority over them, not unless you choose to give it." Hearing that felt like exhaling for the first time in months. He continued, sliding a page toward me. "Harold anticipated you might one day face interference. He drafted what's called a disruption clause. If any resident in your home, related or not, creates a hostile environment or undermines your authority, you can issue a removal notice through this firm. It's binding. You don't need to explain yourself to anyone. You just sign, and we take care of the rest." I stared at the line where my name was written in Harold's steady handwriting. Clarissa D. Holt, trustee. It felt like he was sitting in the room, nodding in that quiet way of his. "Has your son signed anything recently?" Chambers asked. "No," I said, "but his wife's been ambitious." He smiled faintly. "Then she's ambitious in vain." We went over the bank attempt, the billing changes, the intercepted mail. Each point he documented neatly in a report, stapling the pages into a file with the precision of a surgeon. "Should I confront them?" I asked. He shook his head. "No, that's the mistake most people make, trying to win the argument instead of the ground it's happening on. The law's already on your side. Let them keep talking. Every word they say, every document they touch, those are their footprints leading right to your victory." I couldn't help but laugh softly. "You sound like Harold." He said, "I learned from the best." He tapped the folder. He prepared all of this because he knew the world changes, but people don't. He told me, "Clarissa doesn't need to fight. She just needs to remember she's protected." The words hit deep. I hadn't realized until that moment that all these months of swallowing insults, of smiling through mockery, weren't weakness. They were strategy waiting for the right moment. When I left the office, the sky was turning gold. I stood by my car for a long time, holding the folder against my chest. It wasn't heavy. It felt like armor. On the drive home, I passed the boutique where Brianna's card had failed. Through the window, I saw her reflection in the glass, laughing with a friend, her hand sweeping dramatically as she told some story, probably about me. I smiled to myself. For the first time, not in defense, but in certainty. Because now, I didn't need to raise my voice or prove a point. The law already spoke for me. You learn a lot about people when you start tracing where the money really goes. I wasn't looking for proof of betrayal, just clarity. But clarity has a way of turning into evidence. The morning after my meeting with Mr. Chambers, I called the accounting firm that handled Harold's old files and asked for a full review of every home-related payment: property taxes, insurance, maintenance, utilities, the works. The woman on the phone sounded polite, but curious, the way people sound when they realize the person calling isn't confused, but preparing. While the reports were being compiled, I called Gloria. She didn't even let me finish explaining. She said, "Say no more. You want help gathering receipts? I'm on my way." I knew that woman was a storm-wearing lipstick. Gloria showed up in her house slippers, hair wrapped, carrying a notebook and 2 lemonades. Together, we combed through drawers, folders, and every forgotten cabinet. She kept cracking jokes to ease the tension, but every so often her tone turned sharp. "Clarissa, you mean to tell me this girl been walking around in your house planning budgets like she's the treasurer?" I smiled faintly. Apparently, she's got big plans. By late afternoon, the reports came in. Every major expense: property taxes, roof maintenance, lawn care, pest control, insurance. They had all been paid automatically through the Holt Family Trust, directly from the investment account Harold set up decades ago. Ethan's and Brianna's contributions, the so-called shared bills, didn't even cover a fraction. I sat there staring at the numbers, a calm kind of disbelief settling over me. I'd never tracked those payments closely because they'd always been steady. Harold set it up so I didn't have to worry, and for all those years, I hadn't. But now, looking at the breakdown, I saw the full picture. The house had been running on my funds, not Ethan's salary or Brianna's budget lists. Gloria leaned over my shoulder, whistled low. "So she's been bragging about paying bills with your own money? Lord, strike me with patience." I laughed quietly. "Don't ask for too much. He might take you up for it." We spent another hour organizing the evidence, labeling each printout neatly. Gloria poured herself more lemonade and said, "You know, sometimes you don't have to hit back loud. Just hand folks a mirror." That's when I decided I'd had enough mirrors. I wanted records. 2 days later, while organizing the documents into a binder, I found something tucked in the stack of mail Brianna had intercepted. It was a glossy brochure from a remodeling firm called Haven Interiors. The attached letterhead caught my eye. It was addressed to Brianna Holt, thanking her for submitting a home equity loan application. I froze. The letter included an estimate for a complete kitchen renovation, listing my address and a proposed budget of $84,500. And at the top, in bold, it read, "Pending property verification." My fingers went cold. She had applied for a home equity loan against a house she didn't own. "Lord have mercy," Gloria said, reading over my shoulder. "She's trying to borrow on your roof. Does she not even know whose name is on the deed?" I didn't answer. I sat very still, holding the paper between my fingers. In the distance, I heard the faint hum of Brianna's car pulling into the driveway, the sound of her keys at the door. I slipped the brochure back into the envelope, slid it under the binder, and closed it gently. When she walked in, she smiled like she'd won something. "Oh, Mom, you're organizing bills? So proud of you. It's about time we got everything neat and clean." I smiled back. "You're right, dear. Neat and clean solves everything." She kissed my cheek and went upstairs humming to herself, oblivious to the folder resting inches from my hand. Inside that folder was the truth, cold, tidy, and undeniable. I sat there for a long while, tapping the edge of the binder against the table. For months, she'd been turning my piece into her project. But now, finally, I had the blueprint of her downfall, and she'd drafted it herself.
Every home has one room that hears the truth. Mine was the backyard. The hedges, the fountain Harold built with his own hands, the jasmine along the fence, all of it listened more than people did. That's where I heard Brianna's true opinion of me. It was a Saturday afternoon, sunlight scattered across the lawn, the kind of day meant for peace. Brianna had invited her friends for what she called a casual garden brunch. I stayed inside, washing dishes and pretending not to listen as laughter floated through the open window. "So generous of Ethan," one of them said, "letting his mom stay after you two moved in." Brianna laughed, her voice dripping with pride. "We took pity on her, really. She's sweet, but she's been alone too long. It's better this way. Having us around gives her structure. Once we finish the remodel, she'll feel right at home in the guest suite." The guest suite? My own master bedroom? Their laughter rose again, and I could almost feel it crawl across my skin. I wiped my hands, grabbed the tray of lemonade I'd prepared, and stepped outside. The screen door creaked as I pushed it open. The sound snapped the group's laughter in half. "Afternoon, ladies," I said, smiling. "Hot day, isn't it? Thought you might like something cold." Brianna's hand froze around her glass. Her friends exchanged glances. The woman with the curly hair stammered, "Oh, thank you, Mrs. Holt." "Oh, please," I said. "It's Clarissa." I set the tray on the table, pouring each glass with the same calm rhythm Harold used when watering the garden. The air was thick with discomfort. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Brianna regained her voice first. "We didn't have to, Mom. We were just chatting about house plans, minor upgrades." "Upgrades are wonderful," I said, still smiling. "Just make sure the foundation's strong enough to hold them." No one spoke for several seconds. Even the fountain sounded louder. "Well," I said, dusting my palms on my apron, "you ladies enjoy yourselves, and if you need anything else in my house, just holler." The words landed softly, but they stuck like thorns. I turned and went back inside, the screen door closing behind me with a long, slow sigh. Through the window, I watched them. The laughter didn't return. Brianna's smile had turned stiff. She glanced around, muttering something, and the women suddenly found their phones very interesting. About an hour later, I heard her car keys jingle. She and Ethan were leaving for a dinner downtown. I pretended to read in the den, waiting until the sound of their car faded down the street. Then I stepped back out into the garden. Two of her friends were still there, gathering handbags and whispering to each other. One of them, the curly-haired woman from before, hesitated near the gate. She walked up to me, eyes soft but uneasy. She said, "Mrs. Holt," she said quietly, "I just wanted to say, I didn't know. We thought she owned this house. That's what she told us." I looked at her for a long moment, then smiled faintly. Truth has a way of catching up, but thank you for telling me. She nodded quickly and left through the gate, her heels clicking against the stone path. The garden fell silent again. I could smell the faint sweetness of lemonade still hanging in the air, a reminder of the moment power quietly changed hands. For months, Brianna had spoken like I was furniture, something inherited and soon to be replaced. But that afternoon, as her friends drove away in uneasy silence, I realized something simple yet absolute. I didn't need to raise my voice to reclaim my space. I just needed to stand in it. When pride depends on plastic, it always snaps sooner or later. I just didn't think I'd be home to hear it shatter. It was late afternoon when Brianna's car screeched into the driveway, tires crunching against the gravel. I was in the living room, sorting mail with calm hands and a racing mind.
She stormed in before the door even finished swinging, her perfume arriving a second before her fury. "Excuse me?" I looked up slowly. "My card, my platinum card, got declined again at the boutique in front of everyone. I had to leave the entire counter full of clothes. The clerk said it was a payment hold from the bank, and the only reason that would happen is if someone's been tampering with household accounts." Her voice was sharp, shaking around the edges. Ethan walked in a few moments later, holding his phone. "Bree, what's going on?" "What's going on is that your mother's been bleeding us dry. All these bills, all these expenses, I can't keep covering everything while she lounges around pretending she's retired royalty."
I stayed quiet for a moment. Then, very calmly, I closed the envelope I'd been opening and set it aside. "Sit down," I said. Neither of them moved, so I stood, crossed the room, and returned with the brown leather folder I'd kept tucked in the drawer beneath the lamp. The one I'd organized after my meeting with Mr. Chambers. The folder Harold's name was embossed on. I placed it on the dining table and opened it slowly, each document laid out like cards in a deck no one expected me to hold. "This," I said, tapping the first paper, "is the deed to this house. It has one name on it, mine. Not Ethan's, not yours." Brianna's face stiffened, her voice low but shaking. "You're lying." I slid the second document forward. "This is the Holt Family Trust. Every payment, property tax, insurance, maintenance, even the new appliances has come from that account since Harold died. You can call the bank yourself. They'll tell you whose signature is required for every withdrawal." Ethan leaned in, eyes scanning the numbers. "Mom, wait, are you saying—" "I'm saying nothing's ever come out of your paycheck, Ethan," I said gently. "Not a penny of it has touched this house. You've been living comfortably, yes, but not because of what you're earning, because of what your father left." Brianna blinked rapidly, color draining from her cheeks. "That can't be true. We've been budgeting every month. I've been managing everything." "You've been managing illusions," I said. "My trust has been paying for the life you brag about. And before you accuse me again, know this. When you tried to link your credit system to the household account, it triggered a security review. The bank froze any connection that didn't match my authorization." Ethan turned toward her slowly. "You did what?" "I was trying to simplify things," she cried, but her voice cracked under the weight of disbelief in the room. The air felt still, like the house itself was listening. Outside, wind moved through the trees, brushing against the glass. I'd never heard the silence between us sound so loud. "Bree," Ethan said, voice quieter now, "she's showing you proof. You lied to me." "I didn't lie. I just—" She stopped herself, realizing every excuse made her smaller. I gathered the documents back into the folder, my hand steady. "I'm not angry," I said softly. "Just done pretending that peace requires silence. You've both been living off what I built, and that's fine. I didn't mind. But you," I looked her in the eyes, "decided to build your throne on my foundation. That's where we part ways." Brianna didn't answer. Her lips trembled, her eyes darting from me to Ethan, then back again. When I closed the folder, the final snap of leather was louder than any word she could have said. Her entire world, her image, her marriage, her status had been funded by a lie she told herself. And the truth had just declined her card.
There's a silence that follows truth, the kind that hums between walls and makes even the air feel heavier. That silence filled my house the next morning. Ethan hadn't gone to work, Brianna hadn't slept, and I'd made coffee for one, like I used to before everything turned into a 3-person performance. I was folding the morning paper when the front door burst open. Brianna's voice, sharp as ever. "You're a manipulator, Clarissa. That's what you are. You've been planning this for months, waiting to humiliate us." I didn't rise. "I didn't plan anything," I said quietly. "I just stopped pretending." You lied to him, she spat, pointing toward Ethan, who stood by the stairs in a wrinkled shirt, eyes sunken from no sleep. You made him believe he was providing for you. Ethan's mouth opened, then closed again. He didn't know which direction the truth belonged to. Before another word could fly, a calm voice came from the doorway. Good morning, Mrs. Holt, Mr. Holt, Mrs. Brianna Holt. Mr. Chambers stepped inside, briefcase in hand, every step measured. He looked like order walking into chaos. I thought it best to come personally after receiving your message, Clarissa. I understand there's been some confusion. Confusion? Brianna barked. Try deceit. He turned to her slowly. Then let's clear that up. He set the briefcase on the coffee table, opened it, and removed a thick folder, the same one I'd shown the night before, but now stamped and sealed. Mrs. Holt, he said, nodding at me, for formality, could you confirm that this is your original copy of the Holt Family Trust? Yes, I said. He turned to Ethan. And you, sir, can confirm that this is your father's signature here on the original deed. Ethan nodded weakly. That's his handwriting. Good. Then allow me to summarize. Chambers adjusted his glasses. Clarissa Holt is the sole owner and trustee of this property and all connected assets. No one, not her son, not his spouse, has managerial rights or shared ownership. The trust explicitly names Ethan Holt as successor trustee only upon Clarissa's passing or her written resignation. The words fell like stones. Brianna took a step back, color rising to her face. So she's been hoarding everything while letting us think we were helping her? Chambers didn't flinch. Incorrect. Mrs. Holt has been maintaining the property, paying taxes and upkeep, while you benefited from living here. The trust was never yours to manage. She turned to Ethan, eyes wide, desperate. Say something. She's turning you against me. But Ethan wasn't looking at her. He was staring at the page in Chambers' hand, the one that bore his father's final signature, and his own name beneath a clause he'd never read, successor upon death. I don't even have my name on anything, he murmured. His voice cracked. Not the deed, not the accounts, nothing. I looked at him softly. You never needed it, Ethan. Your father and I wanted you to build your own, not live off ours. Brianna let out a shaky laugh, part disbelief, part fear. So what now, huh? She kicks us out? Chambers closed the folder, his smile faint but firm. Mrs. Holt's legal position allows her to request removal of any resident who threatens her peace. The clause exists for this very reason. Whether she enforces it is her choice. The room fell quiet again. Ethan sat down slowly, elbows on his knees, head in his hands. All this time, he whispered, I thought I was taking care of you. I walked to him, rested a hand on his shoulder. You were, baby, just not with money. When Chambers left, the sound of the door clicking shut echoed through every corner of the house. Brianna stood by the window, jaw tight, eyes burning with something between anger and dread. Ethan didn't move. And for the first time since they'd moved in, I felt the house exhale with me, because now it finally knew whose name it carried. There comes a point when even peace starts costing too much. Mine had been expensive for months, paid in patience, sleepless nights, and silence. So that morning I decided to cash it in. Mr. Chambers arrived at 9 sharp. Crisp suit, leather briefcase, that same calm authority he carried everywhere. He placed a single form on the kitchen counter, 1 page, 2 signatures. The disruption clause. It all takes is this, he said, handing me a pen. Once you sign, the notice is official. They'll have 30 days to vacate, and everything will be handled through my office. The paper was simple, clean, unassuming, like most things with power. I signed my name slowly, the way Harold used to when he wanted every letter to stand proud. The ink dried as fast as the resolve in my chest. Will it be posted today? I asked. Chambers nodded. By this afternoon. When he left, the house felt different, lighter, like a storm had finally decided which direction to move. I called Gloria. By noon, she was at my door with boxes, tape, and her own brand of righteous humor. Well, if they're moving out, we're helping them pack, out of the kindness of our hearts, of course. We started in the guest room, Brianna's domain of white furniture, scattered perfume bottles and designer handbags stacked like trophies. Gloria wrapped the crystal vases in newspaper while I folded clothes into neat piles. "You sure about this?" she asked. "I'm sure about it," I said. "The law's done its part. Now it's my turn to make peace practical." While sorting through the drawers, I found an envelope tucked beneath a jewelry box. It wasn't sealed, just folded once with the corner of a business card sticking out. Inside were photocopies of bank forms, loan applications from 2 local credit unions, both listing my address and the property as collateral. At the bottom of one form was a signature, Clarissa D. Holt, only it wasn't mine. I felt the weight of it before the meaning. My hand tightened around the page. She forged my name? Gloria looked over my shoulder, her mouth tightening. Lord have mercy. The papers were dated 3 weeks ago, around the same time she'd be telling her friends about the remodel. The audacity of it wasn't what stunned me, it was the precision. She hadn't just been playing house, she'd been playing ownership. I took a photo of every page, front and back, then slid the originals into a folder. Chambers would need them. By the time we finished, half the room was packed into boxes. Brianna's scent, something sharp and floral, still lingered in the air. I opened the window to let it out. Around 4 o'clock, a knock came at the door. A uniformed delivery clerk handed me a yellow envelope and asked for my signature. Inside was the official eviction notice, embossed with Chambers' seal. 1 copy for me, 1 for the occupants. I walked to the refrigerator, pinned their copy under a magnet shaped like a heart, Brianna's heart magnet, ironically, and stepped back to look at it. There it was, the end of the illusion, printed in black and white. Gloria exhaled slowly. You really did it. Yes, I said. I kept quiet long enough. Now silence will do the talking.
When Ethan came home that evening, I was sitting in the living room, calm as a sunset. He saw the notice first, then me. His lips parted, but no sound came out. It's not personal, I said gently. It's procedural. Upstairs, Brianna's voice erupted into frantic tones, drawers opening, footsteps pacing. She'd seen it too. Gloria gathered her purse and gave me a small, proud smile. You know, sometimes justice doesn't need an audience, she said, just good lighting. The door closed behind her, leaving me in the stillness I'd been chasing for months. I looked around at the half-packed boxes, the sunlight spilling across the floor, the papers waiting on the counter. For the first time since that wedding toast, I felt the house breathe with me, because now it finally knew whose name it carried. Revenge never needed my hands, only gravity. And that week, it worked faster than I expected. It started online, the way modern ruin always does. One of Brianna's friends from that garden brunch, probably the same one who'd apologized to me, posted a photo on social media. It showed Brianna posing in front of the house with the caption, "Boss Woman Energy, designing our forever home." The comments started off sweet. Heart emojis, compliments, admiration. Then someone replied, "Wait, isn't that her mother-in-law's house?" It spread like spilled wine on silk. By the next morning, her follower count had dropped by thousands. Her home design sponsors paused campaigns, politely citing brand image concerns. Influencers thrive on perception, and she'd built hers on borrowed floors. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. The house itself seemed to hum with quiet satisfaction. That afternoon, she sat at the kitchen counter, scrolling furiously through her phone, face pale beneath her perfect makeup. "They're calling me a fraud," she muttered, half to herself, half to Ethan. "Do you understand what this does to my career? Everything I worked for, gone, because people can't mind their business?" Ethan leaned against the counter, jaw tight.
He'd been quieter since the eviction notice. Maybe if you told the truth, it wouldn't have come to this. She slammed her phone down. Don't you dare put this on me. You knew. You let me. She stopped herself, glancing at me when she realized I was standing in the doorway. I didn't say a word, just walked past her, poured a glass of water, and took my seat at the table. The silence between us stretched long enough to make the clock on the wall sound louder. Then her phone buzzed again, an email notification. She opened it and froze. I could see her reflection in the window behind the sink, her mouth slightly open, her hands trembling. "What is it now?" Ethan asked. Her voice came out hollow. "My bank. They froze my accounts." "Why?" I don't know. It says, pending legal review." That was Mr. Chambers' doing. He'd called me earlier that morning after reviewing the forged documents I'd found. "Clarissa," he said in that measured voice of his, "she tried to redirect 2 accounts linked to the trust. We've initiated a freeze on all her activity pending investigation. She won't be able to move a cent." Now, sitting at my table, I just sipped my water and watched her realizations settle like dust. She turned to me, eyes narrowing. "You did this." I raised an eyebrow. "Did what?" "You called your lawyer," she shouted, voice cracking. "You made him ruin me." I looked at her calmly. "No, Brianna, you ruined yourself." Chambers simply pressed pause. Ethan rubbed his temples. "Bree, please, just stop." But she didn't. "You think you're better than me? You're not. You're just lucky, living off your dead husband's money and pretending it's wisdom." Her words hit like thrown stones, but they didn't cut. They just fell short. "I don't need to be better than you," I said softly. "I just need to remember who I am, something you seem to have forgotten." She scoffed, snatched her phone, and stormed upstairs. A few minutes later, I heard drawers opening, zippers snapping. Packing, maybe. Panic always sounds the same. Ethan sat down across from me, face pale. She forged your name, didn't she?" I didn't answer. I didn't need to. He'd already read it in my silence. The next day, one of Gloria's friends from church called to say Brianna's name was all over social media again, this time with screenshots of her decline at Dior and whispers about the woman who faked her way into luxury. The world was just doing what it does best, circling gossip like vultures over a feast. By evening, her sponsorships were gone, her partnerships postponed indefinitely, and her reputation, polished for years, crumbled in a matter of hours. When I went to bed that night, I didn't smile or pray for vengeance. I just whispered what Harold used to say when things finally set themselves right. Gravity works quietly, always does.
Goodbyes don't always come with slammed doors. Sometimes they sound like a sigh after months of pretending. It was 2 mornings after the storm on mine when Ethan knocked softly on my door. He looked 10 years older, unshaven, eyes heavy, shoulders hunched, the kind of tired you can't sleep off. "Mom," he said quietly, stepping into the room, "can we talk?" I sat down my cup of tea. Always. He sat across from me, hands clasped, eyes on the floor. I didn't see it. Any of it. I thought Brianna was ambitious. I didn't realize she was. His voice trailed off. "I let her talk about you, joke about you, and I laugh sometimes. I'm ashamed of that." I reached for his hand, my voice steady. "Son, love doesn't mean blindness. Next time, see people for what they build, not what they wear." He nodded, eyes wet but focused. "You were right all along. Dad was right too. I just wanted to be enough for her."
You were enough, I said softly. She just didn't know what enough looked like. Downstairs, a drawer slammed. Brianna's voice floated up, brittle and sharp. Brianna, I'm not staying here another second. You can come with me or you can stay with your precious mother. He didn't move. She appeared in the doorway a few minutes later, eyes swollen, makeup streaked. You really did it, didn't you, Clarissa? You took everything. I met her gaze, calm as still water. I didn't take anything, dear. I just stopped giving. She let out a bitter laugh, grabbed her purse, and turned to Ethan. You coming or not? He didn't look up. I think I need to figure out who I am without pretending anymore. Her lips pressed tight, trembling between anger and disbelief. She hesitated a moment, long enough for regret to almost form, then stormed out. The sound of the front door slamming echoed like punctuation at the end of a long, cruel sentence. For a while, neither of us spoke. Just the hum of the refrigerator downstairs, the sound of the house settling back into itself. Then Ethan said softly, "What happens now?" I stood, walked to my desk, and opened the folder Chambers had sent that morning. Now, we start over. The trust will be updated this week. From this point forward, neither you nor I will touch it. It will remain sealed until your future child, if you ever have one, grows into someone of good character, someone who knows what legacy truly means. He looked up confused. You mean not even me? I shook my head. You've had enough comfort. I need you to have purpose now. Let your next chapter be something you earn, not inherit. He swallowed hard, nodding slowly. That's fair. I smiled. Your father would have liked that answer. He reached for my hand again, holding it tight, and for the first time in years, the touch didn't feel distant or distracted. It felt like family again, honest, stripped of pretense. Later that evening, as the sun sank behind the magnolia trees, Ethan stood on the porch watching Brianna's car disappear down the street. The house was quiet again, peaceful, not empty. He turned to me and said, "Mom, she always said this place felt too small for her." I smiled faintly. Then maybe she finally found something big enough to get lost in. He exhaled, almost laughing, almost crying, and I realized in that quiet moment that not all losses are tragedies. Some are clean air after months of smoke. That night, I locked the folder away, poured myself a glass of wine, and let the silence fill every corner of the house. It didn't feel lonely. It felt earned. Paperwork has a strange kind of power. It looks lifeless until you realize it can outlive everyone who signs it. That's why the morning after Brianna left, I called Mr. Chambers and told him it's time to update everything. 2 days later, his assistant arrived with a briefcase and a quiet smile, followed by my favorite kind of reinforcement, Gloria. She came in wearing her church hat and reading glasses, declaring, "If we're building a legacy, we're doing it in style." The three of us sat around the dining table, the same one that once held Brianna's dinner parties, now cleared of everything but truth. The lawyer placed a clean draft of my new estate plan before me. The title on top read, "Amended Holt Family Trust." "Here's what you requested," Chambers said, sliding the first document toward me. "Upon your passing, the Holt property and remaining assets shall transfer to your direct descendant, conditional upon 2 achievements: completion of higher education and verified contribution to community service." Gloria leaned over, whispering, "So basically, they'll have to be both smart and kind. I like that." I smiled. Exactly. I want whoever inherits this to know knowledge isn't wealth unless it helps somebody else. Chambers continued, "If no descendant fulfills those conditions, all holdings, real estate, cash reserves, and trust investments will revert to the Clarissa Holt Foundation for Women's Education, per your instructions." Gloria clapped softly, her eyes bright. You're starting a foundation? Lord, you don't play small. I'm just making sure the next woman who needs a door open doesn't have to wait for permission, I said. We spent the afternoon reviewing every clause. The language was precise. No room for manipulation, no hidden loopholes. For the first time, I felt not just protected, but purposeful. As the ink dried, Chambers smiled. Harold would be proud of this one, Clarissa. He left you strength. You've turned it into structure. After he left, Gloria helped me box up old files and label them neatly. She grinned. You know, there's something poetic about this. That girl tried to steal your house, and now your name's going to build other women's homes, schools, futures. I looked out the window, where the magnolias swayed gently in the wind. That's the kind of revenge Harold would have approved of. Quiet, useful, permanent. That evening, Ethan came by to pick up a few of his things. He'd been living with a friend across town while sorting his life out. His eyes fell on the binder on the counter marked the Clarissa Holt Foundation for Women's Education. He picked it up carefully. You did it, he said. I did, I answered. He skimmed through the summary pages, reading every line. When he reached the condition about his future child, he paused. You're really making this strict? Yes, I said. Because I've learned the danger of giving too much too soon. Legacy isn't about inheritance, it's about integrity. He looked at me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. That's fair. The words were simple, but something in his voice carried respect I hadn't heard in years. He set the binder back down gently, almost reverently, like it held something sacred. When he left, the house was quiet again, but it wasn't the kind of quiet that used to ache. It was the kind that sounded like completion. Gloria called later that night. You all right, sis? I'm better than that, I said, smiling into the phone. For the first time, my future feels cleaner than my past. And as I hung up, I realized Harold's last gift wasn't the trust. It was the wisdom to keep trusting myself. A year has a way of sanding down the rough edges of pain, leaving behind something smoother, something truer. 1 year later, I sat on the same porch Harold built with his hands, the same porch where I once listened to silence and called it loneliness. Now it was peace. The magnolia trees were in bloom again, heavy with white petals that drifted like soft reminders of everything time had fixed without my asking. The house was still mine, quiet, sturdy, and humming with its own kind of heartbeat. Ethan visited often now, not out of obligation, but something better, understanding. He'd changed. The tailored suits had given way to rolled-up sleeves, the expensive watch replaced by a plain leather one. He'd found work at a nonprofit downtown, mentoring young men who reminded him of himself before humility set in. Mom, he said one Saturday, settling beside me on the porch swing, you were right about building, not buying. Turns out peace isn't for sale. I smiled, handing him a glass of iced tea. Your father used to say the same thing, only with more grumbling and less wisdom. He laughed softly, the kind that comes from somewhere honest. Brianna reached out last month, he said after a pause, just to say she's doing fine. No details, no social media, no drama. Silence suits her, I said, not unkindly. He nodded, looking out at the yard. I think she finally learned what she couldn't fake. The wind carried the faint sound of chimes from the garden, soft, steady, peaceful. For a long time, we just sat there, watching the light bend through the trees. Later that afternoon, I went inside to check the mail. Among the usual letters was a cream-colored envelope with a university crest in the corner. Inside was a handwritten note from the director of admissions at Lakeshore College. Dear Clarissa Holt, we're pleased to inform you that the first scholarship under the Clarissa Holt Foundation has been awarded to a young woman named Hope Delaney, majoring in education. Her essay was titled, The Hands That Built Me. I read that line twice, The Hands That Built Me. For a moment, I couldn't speak. The tears that came weren't sad, they were full, the kind that hold gratitude instead of grief. I placed the letter on the mantel beside Harold's photo. His smile in that old frame looked almost knowing. Gloria dropped by later that week, bringing her usual batch of lemon bars. She saw the letter, read it, and said, You know, Clarissa, some folks wait their whole lives for payback. You just turned yours into purpose. I chuckled. Revenge rusts fast, but legacy, that stays polished. We sat on the porch as evening settled, the sky turning that deep gold that only happens before sunset. Ethan joined us, humming softly to the rhythm of the rocking chair. The house lights glowed behind us, steady as ever. When Gloria left and Ethan went home, I lingered on the porch a little longer. The air was cool, the kind that wraps you gently instead of biting. I looked up at the window of my home, and felt Harold's promise echo softly through time. Then I whispered to the night, almost like telling a secret meant for only one listener. They mocked me for living off my son's money.